In this example, we're going to look at the language and notation of exponents when we have quantities raised to the third power. So notice we have 4 columns: symbolic form, expanded form, factor language, and evaluate. And in each column, you're given an example of one of the forms. So you can use that as a reference to fill in the other forms. So here we have 6 to the third power, or 6 cubed. In expanded form, that means we'd multiply 6 by itself 3 times, or equivalently in factor language, we'd say 3 factors of 6. Okay. Also note that you should use the asterisk for multiplication here, so Shift 8, and when you hit the preview button it should look like this. Okay. Well, to evaluate 3 factors of 6, 6 times 6 times 6, let's do that down here. So 6 times 6 is 36, and then we'd multiply 36 times 6. Okay, so this first 2 is 36, multiply by another 6. 6 times 6 is 36. This is 18 plus 3, which is 216. And we can use this information for this entire problem, so that will be handy. So 216. Notice in the next example we're given the expanded form, so we're given 3 factors of -6. In symbolic form, we would write this as -6 to the third power. Okay, so we need to put parentheses around -6 to show that it's -6 being raised to the third power, not the opposite of 6 being raised to the third power. And we'll see more examples that will reinforce that in a moment. So in factors language, we would say 3 factors of -6. So notice that we're multiplying 3 numbers, multiplying their absolute value we know is 216, and it's a negative times a negative times a negative, which is negative. So the product of these two will be positive, and then when you multiply by a negative, a positive times a negative is negative. Now we have the opposite of 3 factors of 6. Okay, so let's write this in expanded form first. So we have the opposite, and let's write 3 factors of 6. Okay. So to write this in symbolic form, we wouldn't use the same notation. Notice these mean different things. We would put the opposite of 6 to the third power. Okay, so this implies that we're going to raise 6 to the third power, 3 factors of 6, and we take the opposite last. So it's sort of like this is like multiplication, and we would do the exponent before the multiplication. In this one, the negative is in the parentheses, so it must be included in the exponent. We have the language written here, the opposite of 3 factors of 6. And notice multiplying 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. And we have a negative times a positive, which will be negative. Okay. I'm noticing here I wrote the number 6, and we need to put the word 6 for the computer to accept it. So make sure you write this out in words like we did here. Now finally, we have a symbolic form again, and we're going to write it in expanded form and in factor language. So basically, notice this is just like this one, but we have an opposite out front. So we have an opposite of 3 factors of -6. Okay. So -6 times itself 3 times with the opposite out front. And let's write this language, so it'll be just like this, except it's the opposite of 3 factors of -6. So the opposite of 3 factors of -6. Now we know the product of 3 6s is 216. Now let's see about the sign. So negative times negative is positive, a positive times a negative is negative, and the opposite of a negative is positive. Okay, so notice you may see a pattern here. When you have an even number of negative and or opposite signs, it's positive. And when you have an odd, so here we had 1 or 3 negative signs, the result was negative.